Welcome back to the Truth Factory. I want to talk about Syria. The mainstream media is not presenting you with the whole story, and there's something really suspicious going on.
Eastern Ghouta, that's a suburb of Damascus, showing several people Syrian activists say were attacked with a suspected chemical agent.
And we begin tonight with a horrific attack overseas,
where opposition activists and aid groups say at least 40 people were killed in a suspected chemical weapons attack over the weekend.
The U.S. accusing Russia and Syrian President Assad of the chemical attack.
Dozens have died, and local doctors say those numbers could go up. Now, CNN cannot independently verify these videos taken by anti-government activists and doctors.
It may be impossible to verify who carried out this latest attack or what it was.
Both the Syrian and Russian governments are denying involvement.
Last week, Trump said that he wanted to leave Syria.
I want to bring our troops back home. I want to start rebuilding our nation.
And while this made most Americans happy, not everyone was okay with this decision. On April 4th, Israeli media outlet Haaretz reported, Trump wants to leave Syria. Israel thinks this is a problem. And just days after President Trump says he wants to leave Syria, there's a reported chemical attack on unarmed civilians. This attack is being blamed on the democratically elected Syrian president Bashar al-Assad, even though there is no evidence being presented that proves he did this.
Do you think it's possible that Trump's announcement to withdraw might have emboldened some bad actors here?
No, I don't, but I think the president's going to have to reconsider his plan for an early withdrawal in light of what has happened.
And why would Assad use chemical weapons on his own people for seemingly no reason while he's on the cusp of victory? Syria is almost 100% liberated, and really all that's left is a small part of Ghouta held by a rebel group called Jaish al-Islam. And just last week, Russia had announced a deal with this rebel group which started an evacuation of 40,000 rebels from Douma. This war was seemingly days from being over, until now. And if the story sounds familiar to you, it might be because almost exactly a year ago, on April 4th, 2017, Assad was accused of doing this exact same thing, using a chemical attack on his own people, which prompted the United States to launch 59 Tomahawk missiles at a Syrian airbase, which gave warhawks like John McCain a boner, if you could still get a boner.
So recognize this is the beginning. This is only the first step. If we want to succeed, we're going to have to step by step do a lot more than this.
So what you're saying is a lot more than just Tomahawk cruise missiles going in there. You want warplanes to go in there with pilots. They have air defense systems. They could be endangered. But are you also saying ground troops, U.S. ground troops?
I have personally reviewed the intelligence, and there is no doubt the Syrian regime is responsible for the decision to attack and for the attack itself.
There was absolutely no evidence to prove that Assad was guilty of this chemical weapons attack. Now, if we go back to August of 2013, the Washington Post reported that Assad had killed 1,400 Syrians in a chemical weapons attack. This is what prompted Obama to seek congressional approval to strike in Syria.
We know the Assad regime was responsible.
But the White House admits it doesn't have hard evidence President Assad ordered the chemical weapons attack.
According to Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Seymour Hersh, a report from the British intelligence showed that the sarin gas used in this attack in Syria didn't come from Assad's stockpiles. And the Lloyd Postal report concluded that the United States government's interpretation of the technical intelligence it gathered for the August attack could not possibly be correct, and that Obama was a liar, pants on fire. Hersh also said that a secret agreement in 2012 was reached between the Obama administration and the leaders of Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar to set up a sarin gas attack and blame Assad. As a side note, these are also the same countries that funded ISIS. Seymour Hersh also implied that Hillary Clinton, the former Secretary of State and devil spawn, had approved sending Libya stockpiles of sarin gas through Turkey for Syrian rebels to use to frame Assad in order to justify the United States invasion of Syria, just as the United States had invaded Libya to eliminate Gaddafi, which has led to the immigrant crisis now plaguing Europe. But at this point, what difference does it make?
I am confident that Assad's days are numbered.
The world will not waver Assad must go.
We both agree that Assad needs to go.
It is just further evidence that Assad has to go.
He is no longer legitimate and that he needs to go.
For the sake of the Syrian people, the time has come for him to step aside.
Assad is on his way out. We all need to be thinking about the day after Assad.
Assad has lost all legitimacy, that his time has passed.
President al-Assad has lost legitimacy, that he needs to step down.
As I have said many times before, Assad has lost all legitimacy, and Assad must go.
He has stated unequivocally that Assad has lost all legitimacy and cannot conceivably continue to govern.
Assad has lost all legitimacy to govern.
We've also been clear that Assad has lost all legitimacy to lead.
What we've done is organize the international community, saying Assad has to go.
And I'm confident that Assad will go. It's not a question of if, it's when.
In 2013, Barack Obama signed a secret order with the CIA to create a program reportedly costing $500 million to train and equip so-called moderate Syrian rebels in an attempt to overthrow Assad's regime. As a side note, there is no such thing as a moderate rebel. And Obama's program ended up being a colossal waste of resources, and unsurprisingly, continually sending deadly weapons to rebel fighters in the Middle East turned out to be a pretty bad idea, because now the majority of weapons ISIS has came as a result of Obama's program. But maybe that was his intention. I'll let you draw your own conclusions. Now let's fast forward to May of 2014, when former Secretary of State John Kerry says in an interview that the Obama administration is justified in bombing Syria in order to remove their chemical weapons.
It was his decision to decide to bomb that helped to bring people together so we could cut the deal that got 100% of the declared chemical weapons out of Syria. And people nevertheless have been critical of one day of bombing versus the virtue of getting 100% of the chemical weapons out of Syria. And I ask any of those critics today, where do you think you would be if ISIL today had access to those chemical weapons in Syria? Because of what we did, we got 100% of the weapons out, and they don't have access to those extraordinary weapons.
So if the Syrian government is now 100% chemical weapons free thanks to Lurch, how is it that Assad used chemical weapons on his own people in April of this year and of last year if those chemicals no longer exist? Well, here's Assad's very rational response to last year's accusations.
Does Syria have chemical weapons today? Have all your chemical weapons inventory been destroyed by the OPCW? Also, would Syria be holding on to some chemical weapons or hiding it? Your thoughts, Mr. President?
Actually, they announced a few years ago that Syria is devoid of chemical weapons. Even John Kerry announced that Syria is free of any chemical weapons. They wouldn't have done so if they weren't sure about this. No, we don't have, and we don't have the facilities now, even if we wanted to do so.
So there's no proof that Assad attacked his own people, there's no proof that the Syrian government even has chemical weapons, and there's zero motive for Assad to commit these atrocities. So why are we buying this narrative? This is clearly an orchestrated false flag and it's not fooling anyone. Even Julian Assange doesn't believe this, as WikiLeaks is offering a $100,000 reward for official information showing who is actually responsible for the alleged attack in Syria. This is some real deep state garbage, and there are several countries and organizations that would be motivated to frame Assad to keep this war going, including France, the UK, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia. But most of all, continued conflict in Syria benefits Israel. By keeping Syria in a constant state of upheaval, Assad has his hands tied trying to keep the country stable and to stay in power. This means Assad has no time to politically influence Israeli geopolitical interests like Palestine or Lebanon. This is why Israel has been firing missiles at Syria for months, including this week, and why they're absolutely clamoring for the United States to act in Syria, which in my opinion is a terrible idea.
Overnight, action from Israel. Warplanes striking a Syrian airbase, also used by Iran.
Israeli warplanes hit the same base 2 months ago. They launched this overnight attack from here, inside Lebanese airspace, firing 8 guided missiles.
War monitoring group said the airstrikes killed 14 people. Israel's foreign ministry had no comment when asked about the accusations.
The United States doesn't need to get more involved in another unjustifiable war in the Middle East based on false accusations of weapons of mass destruction. I think we've all learned our lesson there. And according to several of Trump's tweets from 2013, he already knows this. Stating, so Obama wants to bomb ISIS in Iraq and arm them in Syria? What is he doing? And again, to our very foolish leader, do not attack Syria. If you do, many very bad things will happen, and from that fight, the US gets nothing. Trump needs to listen to his own advice because he was right. There is nothing to gain for the United States being involved in a proxy war in Syria. Since Trump took over in 2016, suddenly the massive problem of ISIS, which Obama said would span generations, is almost completely defeated. Russian and Syrian armies work together, and Syria is becoming stable, which many countries don't want. This brings us to now, where everyone is looking to Trump to make a move. But if Assad wasn't the one who did this recent attack, did it even happen? Or if it did, where did those chemicals come from?
So who's behind it? It's simply the United States and the Western intelligence with the terrorists. They staged this play just to have pretext to attack Syria. And that's what happened a few days later when they attacked our airport. And actually they supported the terrorists because ISIS launched attack the same day of the American attacks on our airbase.
Let's answer the first question by addressing the White Helmets, as they were the group that released images and clips of children dying and receiving oxygen through respirators following the alleged poison gas attack. This so far is the only evidence the world is using to blame Assad. Now, on the surface, the White Helmets operate as a volunteer humanitarian NGO organization in parts of rebel-controlled Syria and Turkey to help with search and rescue and evacuation. But according to their own website, they also receive funding from the governments of the UK, Holland, Denmark, Germany, Canada, New Zealand, and the United States. In fact, they receive millions and millions of dollars from these countries.
Well, I can tell you that we provide through USAID about $23 million in assistance to them.
I'm proud to say we're giving them another, I think, £32 million of funding as part of a wider £65 million package.
The White Helmets are presented as heroes by legacy media in countries that are against Assad.
The White Helmets is tracking the Syrian first responders who risk their lives to save others in war-torn Aleppo.
A small group of volunteers called the White Helmets run into smoldering rubble and rescue injured and trapped victims, including infants and little children. They saved the life of this 5-year-old boy named Omran earlier this summer, his bloodied, shell-shocked face becoming a stark reminder of the toll of this war.
They even have a Netflix mini documentary which has won an Oscar.
And the Oscar goes to... Okay, the White Helmets.
The White Helmet story is very simple. It's a facelift of al-Nusra Front in Syria, just to change their ugly face into more humanitarian face.
But in my investigation, I stumbled upon some pretty troubling information about them. Despite the White Helmets' claim of a gas attack this week, according to the Washington Post, the Russian Reconciliation Center has spoken with doctors in Duma who reported that they had not received any patient with signs of chemical poisoning. Neither did the Syrian Red Crescent Society. The center also said that no traces of chemical agents were found in that area where the alleged attack had taken place, adding that the video spread by the White Helmets were fake, aimed at derailing the Syrian ceasefire. Now, I normally wouldn't believe a Russian official about this as they are Assad's main ally and they would have motivations to lie. But then I found this distressing video that the White Helmets posted with the hashtag mannequin challenge, where they filmed what looks like a real crisis with added sound effects for a social media post, which they soon after deleted. It's really disturbing how real this looks. Obviously, that guy is just an actor, but it makes you wonder if every video they shoot is staged. I mean, they do have an Oscar. I also found these videos of the so-called impartial, unarmed white helmets acting like shady jihadists, a la snack barring. So are the white helmets real heroes, or are they just a propaganda front paid for by the West to gain public support while attacking Syria? Now, I believe that chemical gas attacks have happened in Syria. In fact, Jaish al-Islam, the so-called moderate rebels who keep people in cages to use as human shields, have admitted to using them. And when the Syrian army recently liberated parts of eastern Ghouta, they found that Jaish al-Islam had a chemical weapons lab with materials that allegedly came from Saudi Arabia. This is consistent with the findings of investigative journalist Christoph Lehmann, who said that top US and Saudi officials were responsible for the chemical weapons being used in Syria. And to make matters more damning for the Obama administration and for Hillary Clinton, 2 industry-leading US analysts determined that Lehmann was correct. And while I think researching this topic may have made me swallow the black pill, as I'm not sure I can ever trust anyone ever again, but at this time of making the video, Trump hasn't reacted to Syria at this point, and I hope it stays that way. But this readout of Trump's call with French Prime Minister Macron doesn't seem that promising, since they declared a strong joint response. That's all I had to say for now. This video took forever to make because there's so much research that went into it. If you like what I do and you want to support me, there are links in the description to my PayPal and my Patreon. And I do want to thank everyone who is currently supporting me. Thank you for letting me do what I love to do, which is be a sassy cat on the internet. Thank you so much and have a great night. Meow!